You will never doubt your ability to manifest any desire using the strongest energy in the universe. There are moments in life when the universe seems unbearably silent, as if every attempt to change, grow, or manifest something meaningful dissolves no sooner than it begins. You try to move forward, yet it feels as though the ground beneath you keeps pulling you back into the same patterns, the same emotions, the same unanswered questions. It's in these moments, when you feel disconnected from your own essence, that the journey toward manifestation becomes less about what you want and more about who you have become along the way. This video invites you into a space where the noise quiets and a deeper truth emerges, one that doesn't demand your perfection but your presence. As you start this path with me, notice the subtle stirring within you, that small pulse of awareness that has never abandoned you, even in your loneliest hours. The desire to manifest is not merely an ambition, it is a remembrance, a soft echo of who you once were before life layered fear and doubt over your spirit. Here we do not rush your awakening, nor do we pretend that the wounds you carry can be ignored. Instead, we move slowly, acknowledging the pains that have shaped your path, while making space for the most powerful energy of the universe to work through you. Throughout this journey, you will learn how alignment replaces force, how intention transforms into reality, and how the universe responds when your inner world finally speaks a unified language. This is where your reconnection begins. There is a quiet moment in every seeker's life when they begin to sense that the barrier between who they are and who they long to become is not built from external circumstances, but from internal stories that have been repeated for so long that they have come to sound like permanent truths. This chapter begins at that subtle threshold, where the familiar weight of doubt meets the first flicker of recognition that the universe has never been withholding. It has simply responded with absolute precision to the internal state you sustain daily. When a person carries the belief that they are broken, unlucky, forgotten, or undeserving, the world around them rearranges itself to reflect these assumptions, not as punishment but as resonance. And because the human heart grows fatigued in the repetition of disappointment, many eventually surrender not to life, but to tiredness, believing that manifesting is a skill reserved for the few. Yet something remarkable happens when you begin to trace that doubt back to its origins. Beneath every fear of inadequacy, there is a memory. Beneath every hesitation to dream bigger, there is a moment when hope was interrupted. Beneath every belief that the universe does not respond, there is an occasion when you asked, but your request did not come in the expected form. The strongest energy in the universe does not move through the mind alone, and this is where most people unknowingly abandon their own power. They attempt to manifest from a place where their thoughts and emotions contradict each other. The mind claims readiness, but the body still carries the tremor of past failures. The voice affirms abundance, but the heart is trained by the past to shrink from opportunities. This internal conflict is what creates the energetic noise that prevents the surrounding field from recognizing clarity in their requests. Imagine someone who repeatedly failed in relationships, not because they lacked love to offer, but because their early experiences taught them that love always came accompanied by loss or disappointment. When this individual tries to manifest a healthy partner, their intention is sincere, but the body reacts with vigilance, anticipating the worst. The nervous system remains anchored in memories, not possibilities. Their desire is real, but its frequency is shaped by fear. It is this gap between wanting something and being emotionally available to receive it that creates the all-too-common phenomenon, deeply desiring something that never materializes. The universe is not refusing the request. It is simply responding to what is strongest within the person, and almost always, emotion is stronger than thought. As you walk further into this chapter, begin to notice how your own internal landscape responds to your current desires. If wealth is the dream, observe whether you meet the idea of prosperity with openness or constriction. If peace is the longing, explore whether silence brings you rest or unease. If love is the deepest yearning, note whether vulnerability appears as a threat or a natural expansion of the soul. Each of these reactions is a compass revealing the true frequency from which you have been trying to manifest. And while many believe that discipline of thought is the key, the truth is that the universe always responds to the sum of your internal state, never just to momentary thought. There comes a point in the seeker's journey when this understanding becomes liberating rather than intimidating. Because once you recognize that your frequency has been shaped by unresolved pain, you finally understand that there is nothing wrong with you. Nothing about your past makes you unworthy of manifestation. Your heartbreaks, disappointments, and losses did not remove your power. They merely conditioned your system to operate in a mode that no longer serves your spirit. This realization opens the path to reconnecting with yourself, not as someone who failed to manifest, but as someone who never received the emotional tools to integrate desire, intention, emotion, and presence. And it is here that the strongest energy in the universe begins to reveal itself, not as an implacable external force, but as an internal state of coherence. When mind, body, and emotion begin to move in a shared direction, the field around you finally finds a clear signal to respond. You do not need to force outcomes, repeat phrases incessantly, or try to control every detail. The field of manifestation responds to what is stable within you. If stability has been shaped by fear, it will respond to that. But if stability emerges from a place of awareness, self-contact, and inner truth, the universe has no choice but to reorganize itself around this new vibration. This is not poetic idealism. It is an energetic process, as old as time. There is a particular kind of stillness that appears when a person finally becomes aware that the universe has never been distant, indifferent, or selective. Rather, it has been mirroring internal states with absolute precision. This second chapter unfolds in that stillness, where the longing for transformation meets the necessity of confronting one of the most overlooked truths in the manifestation journey. People often try to reach for extraordinary realities while holding on to emotional architectures built in seasons of survival. They aspire to abundance while breathing scarcity, seek connection while protecting themselves from vulnerability, and call for peace while carrying unspoken storms within the nervous system. What often appears as failure is not a reflection of the universe's neglect, but of an inner world that has not yet learned to trust itself. There is a subtle paradox that shapes the lives of many spiritual seekers. When they pray, visualize, or intend, they are convinced they are calling upon the universe for help. But beneath the conscious request lies an emotional signature shaped by years of unresolved pain, betrayal, or disappointment. This emotional signature becomes the dominant signal the universe responds to, even when the conscious mind insists on wanting something different. You can desire expansion with every fiber of your being, yet if your emotional body still remembers constriction as home, your frequency will echo the old pattern. This is why so many individuals committed to their spiritual growth feel trapped in an invisible loop, repeating the same cycles despite their best intentions. It is not spiritual incompetence, it is emotional inertia. Consider the person who has spent most of their life navigating environments where they needed to minimize their needs to feel safe. When this person attempts to manifest a life of abundance and freedom, their desire is sincere, but the body reacts with hesitation. Freedom feels unfamiliar. Expansiveness feels exposed. Somewhere inside, an old program whispers that visibility invites judgment, that receiving more requires effort beyond what they can sustain, or that abundance is for others, but somehow not for them. The mind reaches outward, but the body pulls inward. The universe, in turn, responds to the pull, not the reach. This inner conflict is rarely acknowledged, yet it is one of the most significant forces that determine whether a manifestation takes root or collapses before it begins. The strongest energy in the universe reveals itself only when inner fragmentation gives way to inner coherence. Coherence does not mean perfection or unshakable certainty. It means that the multiple layers of your being begin to speak the same language. Your thoughts stop contradicting your emotions stop contradicting your behaviors stop contradicting your desires. When these layers begin to align, even slowly, the energetic field around you becomes unmistakably clearer. Manifestation ceases to be a battle of willpower and becomes a natural unfolding. What previously felt like resistance from the universe becomes recognition of your readiness. And readiness, contrary to what many believe, is not measured by how intensely you want something, but by how deeply you embody the possibility of receiving it. To understand this embodiment, imagine a garden that has been neglected for years. The soil is dry, the roots weakened, and the environment inhospitable. Planting new seeds in this condition is possible, but they will struggle because the ground has not been prepared to nourish them. The same occurs with manifestation. When the internal soil is hardened by unresolved experiences, expectations cannot flourish into reality. Not because the seeds are defective, but because the environment within you is not equipped to sustain them. Preparing the soil is not glamorous. It requires self-honesty, encountering forgotten emotions, and facing truths you once silenced to survive. Yet, as the soil softens even slightly, the universe senses the shift and begins to respond. What once required force begins to flow. There is another dimension often ignored in the dialogue manifestation, the emotional fatigue carried by those who have tried repeatedly without seeing results. This fatigue is not merely discouragement, it is the slow erosion of trust in oneself. When someone has invested attempting years to manifest through affirmations, visualizations, or spiritual practices, and continues to experience stagnation, a quiet grief emerges. They begin to question their spiritual worth, believing they are missing something essential. But the truth is far more compassionate. They are not broken, they are burdened. Their soul has not lost its ability to create. It has been overwhelmed by the weight of unresolved memory. There are seasons in a person's life when the weight of their own history begins to feel heavier than the future they wish to create. It is not simply the burden of memories, but the subtle realization that the past has shaped the lens through which they interpret everything, including the possibilities they give to reach for. This third chapter enters precisely into that quiet and vulnerable threshold, where the desire to move forward is confronted by the invisible architecture of an identity formed in circumstances that no longer match the life one wishes to manifest. The strongest energy in the universe cannot fully activate in someone who continues to perceive themselves through the eyes of a former self, and yet, this is where most individuals unconsciously remain. They attempt to manifest new realities while anchored in old identities, unaware that the universe responds not to their hopes, but to the version of themselves they believe they are. Identity is not merely a concept, it is a vibration. It is shaped by stories you were told, experiences you survived, and conclusions you drew in moments of fear, loss, or uncertainty. These conclusions often become silent agreements you carry within. Agreements like, "I am always behind," "I have to fight for everything," or "good things do not last for me." These internal contracts are powerful not because they are true, but because they have been repeated for so long that they have become familiar. Familiarity in the language of the nervous system feels safe, even when it limits you. And this is where the conflict arises. You may consciously desire abundance, love, or peace, but if your identity is configured around struggle, loneliness, or emotional vigilance, your energy will resonate more strongly with what feels familiar than with what feels expansive. Imagine someone who has spent years navigating environments where they had to silence their needs to avoid conflict or rejection. Over time, this person may internalize an identity that says their desires are an inconvenience, their voice is unimportant, or their worth must be proven. When they attempt to manifest a life where they are fully seen, supported, and valued, their intention does not lack sincerity. But deep inside, the identity formed in years of self-suppression whispers that receiving too much attention is unsafe, that being chosen is unlikely, or that abundance will require more strength than they have left. Even when the universe begins to send opportunities, this internal identity filters them through fear, mistrust, or disbelief. The person may turn away from the very things they prayed for, not because they are self-sabotaging consciously, but because their identity has not yet expanded to match the life they are calling in. The transformative power of understanding identity lies in realizing that your manifestations do not fail because your desires are too big. They fail because your identity has been too small for too long. Not small in worth, but small in permission. The strongest energy in the universe emerges when identity and desire begin to align. When who you believe you are finally becomes spacious enough to hold what you are asking for, the universe meets you with immediacy. This is why shifting identity is not an intellectual exercise but an emotional and energetic process. Your body must feel the truth of who you are becoming before your reality can reflect it. There is a tenderness required in this process because expanding identity often means confronting grief. The grief of recognizing how much time you have spent diminishing yourself, How many years were lived trying to fit into frames that never honored your soul? And how many opportunities you walked away from because the version of you that existed at that time could not imagine deserving more? This grief is not a sign that you are failing. It is proof that you are awakening. As you allow this awareness to move through you, it softens the defenses your identity built to protect you. What once felt like a rigid structure becomes a flexible landscape, capable of adapting, growing, and receiving. The strongest energy in the universe cannot coexist with an identity built on fear, self-dismissal, or emotional scarcity. It requires a sense of inner truth that does not rely on external validation. It requires the courage to imagine yourself as someone worthy of what you desire before any evidence appears. It requires the willingness to let go of the version of you that survived past wounds so that the version of you who is ready to create can finally emerge. The universe does not ask you to erase your past, it asks you to stop using it as a compass. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when they begin to realize that manifestation is not blocked by a lack of desire, effort, or imagination, but by the subtle patterns that govern their daily life. Patterns so familiar that they are rarely questioned. This fourth chapter unfolds within this realization, the space where people finally recognize that the universe is not responding to the rituals they perform occasionally, but to the energy they sustain consistently, especially in the quiet hours when no one is watching. Many individuals accumulate methods, techniques, and spiritual practices not because they are ineffective, but because they approach them with an urgency born from fear rather than alignment. The strongest energy in the universe does not emerge through force, repetition, or intensity. It arises from coherence in the mundane, from the emotional truth that shapes each ordinary moment. When someone feels spiritually stuck, it rarely happens in the dramatic events of life. It happens in the small choices that slowly drain their frequency. A person may say they want peace, yet they continue living in environments of constant overstimulation. They may declare their intention to welcome abundance, but feel inner contraction every time they check their bank account. They may long for love, yet their nervous system tightens the moment vulnerability enters the room. These subtle reactions are like quiet signatures, sending messages to the universe that contradict what the conscious mind is requesting. The greatest misunderstanding occurs when people believe manifestation is about focusing intensely on what they want, while ignoring the emotional atmosphere they live in daily. The universe does not respond to momentary bursts of clarity. It responds to the underlying tone of your energy. There is an undeniable truth often overlooked in spiritual teachings. Small incoherences accumulate. When a person promises themselves they will rest but pushes through exhaustion anyway, the body receives a message that safety is conditional. When they tell themselves they deserve abundance, yet continue apologizing for their needs, their energy communicates scarcity. When they express gratitude during meditation but criticize themselves throughout the day, the field around them becomes confused, receiving signals that contradict each other. These small fractures between intention and embodiment shape the energetic foundation from which manifestation occurs. They create an internal environment where the universe cannot find a consistent signal to mirror. Consider someone who has practiced visualization for years, imagining a life filled with freedom, connection, and emotional abundance. Their visions are vivid and sincere, yet their day-to-day life is marked by obligation, self-neglect, and emotional suppression. When they visualize, their energy expands, but as soon as they return to their daily habits, the expansion habits collapse. It is not lack of effort or belief. It is the absence of an inner environment capable of sustaining the vibration they touch briefly during spiritual practices. Visualization, intention, and focus are powerful tools, but they cannot override the emotional truth a person carries from moment to moment. The universe responds to the emotional state that is most familiar within you, not the one you visit occasionally. The strongest energy in the universe becomes accessible when the internal world begins to stabilize. Stability does not mean perfection, it means honesty. It means recognizing how you truly feel, instead of layering spiritual language on top of unresolved emotions. It means allowing discomfort to surface without collapsing into self-judgment. It means noticing the moments when you speak a desire, yet feel fear in your chest, not as failure but as a signal of where your energy seeks healing. Honesty creates coherence, and coherence is the magnetic force through which the universe communicates. It is the recognition that your desires are not abstract wishes. They are invitations to embody a version of yourself that can sustain them. There is a silent turning point in the manifestation process, one that is rarely described explicitly, the moment when a person stops trying to force outcomes and begins tending to their inner landscape. This shift does not look dramatic, nor does it produce immediate results. Instead, it feels like a slow unburdening, a gentle recalibration of how you report to yourself. You begin treating your emotions with respect instead of resistance. You start acknowledging your fears without letting them define your identity. You allow softness to enter places where you once demanded performance. As this occurs, the nervous system moves out of survival mode, and the energetic field around you becomes more receptive. Manifestation becomes... There is a quiet turning point in every journey of transformation, a moment when something inside you stops reaching outward in desperation and instead begins listening inward with stillness and truth. This conclusion rests in that inner space, where all the concepts, reflections, and awakenings explored until now begin to weave themselves into a single realization. Manifestation was never about convincing the universe to give you something. It was about dissolving every layer of doubt that once convinced you that you were separate from the very force that shapes reality. This journey, you have seen that your past does not define your future, that the wounds throughout you carried were not evidence of inadequacy, but invitations to awaken, and that the universe has responded to you with flawless coherence from the beginning. As you integrate these teachings, a subtle shift begins to occur. You no longer approach your desires with fear of disappointment, but with the understanding that every true manifestation begins as an internal alignment before it becomes an external form. You recognize that your emotions, once dismissed as obstacles, are actually the energetic language through which you communicate with the universe. You see that your identity, once shaped by survival, can now expand into something capable of receiving more, holding more, and sustaining more. The strongest energy in the universe has always moved through the simplicity of coherence. When your thoughts stop fighting your emotions, when your emotions stop contradicting your actions, and when your actions finally honor the truth of your inner being. In this space of alignment, doubt gently loosens its grip. You no longer wonder if your desires are too big, because you understand that desire is the compass of the soul, pointing you toward your own evolution. You no longer fear the unknown, because the unknown has become a creative field rather than a threat. You no longer chase manifestations, because you have become someone who naturally attracts what resonates with your state of being. The universe does not grant your desires out of mercy, it mirrors your frequency with precision. And now, your frequency carries the signature of someone who remembers their power. The path ahead is not about perfection, it is about presence. It is about choosing again and again the version of yourself who is capable of living the life you once only imagined. And as you continue, know this: the universe is not waiting for you to prove your worth. It is waiting for you to allow your truth. Before you leave this moment, allow one question to gently settle into your awareness. If the universe is already responding to the person you are becoming, what are you finally ready to receive without hesitation or fear? If this message awakens something within you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so you never walk this journey alone again. Keep watching the next video on the screen, because your transformation is already in motion, and the universe is listening.